In this video, I'm going to show you how to make up Maddie's Caddy. Now, this is a little suitcase that I've designed for Maddie the ragdoll to carry her clothes in. It is a downloadable pattern which you'll need to buy from my website. I'll leave the details in the description box underneath the video. So you'll have the instructions, your cutting instructions, and a pattern for the top and the bottom in the download when you purchase that. So it's a nice little box. You can use it for other things apart from ragdoll's clothes, of course. And 2 zips to open it, and there is Bosal single-sided foam on the inside to give it structure, and that's quite nice to quilt through as well. So on the inside there's a pocket in the lid. It is fully lined. It does involve hand sewing to attach the lining, and I've put some contrasting piping just around the edge as well, just to finish that off. Now, the fabric that I've used here is from a fabric panel which I've designed featuring Maddie and her little dog Mo. You can use any fabric you like for this, but if you wanted to go for this fabric, it does come in a panel which is rather large. It's 150 centimetres wide. You'll have plenty left over if you wanted to make another little project from it, and just under 1/2 metre in length. And that one is the blue. And we also have the aubergine available for you as well. And that's the aubergine. But again, you don't have to go for the panel. Or you could buy the panel on its own and make something else out of it. Maybe an outfit for Maddie. Would be a nice little project for you there as well. So again, you will need to go download your pattern instructions. And, whoops, I'll just put that away there. So go to debbieshawsewing.com and look under the download section. Have a think about what fabrics you're going to use, and I'll show you how to make it. So the first thing to do is to cut out all of your pattern pieces. You will have a pattern for the top and the bottom, and the measurements for the side pieces and all of the other pieces that you need. Now with this one, I'm obviously using the Maddie panel. You could use any fabric that you like, but I thought it might be rather fun to take the pattern over the 2 different colours on the panel. Just thought it might make it look a little bit different. So not the handle, but all of the outer pieces have the Bosal on the back of them. If you haven't used this before, it will be creased when you get it home because it'll be folded up in a packet. But if you steam your iron over the non-fusible side, then the creases just drop out, so don't worry about that. You'll have a scratchy side, and that's the glue, and it's slightly shiny as well. So place your fabric over the top of the glue side and then iron with steam. Leave it to cool down, and then that is stuck. If you do make a mistake or you get any wrinkles in it, then you can just peel this back while it's still warm and iron it back down again. So I'm just going to quilt the top of my case. You could do both sides if you wanted to, but I'm not going to do the bottom of mine. So test if you're going to use a heat erasable pen, just make sure it doesn't affect your fabric. And I'm going to draw 45-degree lines across here at 2 inches apart. So draw your first line, and then I'm just going to turn the ruler over so I've got the 2-inch marking there, and draw 2-inch squares all over. Now you don't have to quilt, and you can quilt in any design that you like. So you could do 60-degree triangles. Straight lines would look very well. And of course you don't have to quilt at all if you don't want to. So we'll cover all of this in one direction and then go back over in the opposite direction so that I've got squares all over the top of the caddy. So I'm just lining up my ruler now across one of the lines that I've just made, and draw my first line here. So whizzle this around, and then again on that 2-inch mark, and we'll go all the way across. And then I'm going to sew across these lines. As this isn't a seam, I can lengthen my stitch now, and you may find that when you're sewing through the Bosal that your stitches tend to look a little bit shorter than they would do normally, and that's because of the thickness that you're sewing through. It's not going to be an issue for your sewing machine. You don't need a special needle, but a longer stitch may look better. So I'm actually using a stitch length 3 on my machine here. I like to start in the centre lines when I'm quilting and literally sew across all of the lines until the whole area is covered. So that's finished. An easy way to make sure that you've covered all of the areas to just turn that over. You'll see missing lines easier on the back than you do on the front. So let's just snip away the, oh there we go, the longer threads here from the edge. And then I'm just going to iron across the top of this to take away my heat erasable pen marks. If you're using an air or a water erasable pen, don't iron it because that's going to make the marks permanent. You can use a chalk if you don't want to use an erasable pen like this. A chalk pencil would work absolutely fine. So I'm just getting the iron in between those marks. So the thing I love about the Bosal foam is when you quilt it and the stitches, as you can see, just sink into it. It gives a really lovely texture. And I actually think it gives an expensive look to your work as well. Right, I think, oh, another one there. I think they're all gone. So the next thing to do is to apply the piping. Now I'm not going to cut this to size. I'm going to sew it straight on here as it is. And cut it down when I come to the end. So you're going to sew the raw edge to the raw edge along that stitch line, and I'm going to leave about 1.5 inches or 2 inches just loose at the end here. So I'm not going to pin it, and I don't think I need my sewing machine, my zipper foot on my sewing machine either. Let's give it a go, because the cording isn't actually too thick, so your presser foot should go over the top of it quite nicely. So I do have my scissors at hand, because as I approach the corner, I'm just going to snip into the seam allowance of the piping, and that's going to allow it to go around the corner without stretching too much and without puckering. Whoops. So as I'm coming to the corner, I'm just going to hold that in place and bend it around, and then just feed it under the machine. Try not to sew through the actual cord, but we are sewing quite close to it, just along that existing stitch line. So I'm coming up to another corner here, snip that thread. So don't cut through the stitches, just into the seam allowance, and that allows the edge of the piping cord to just kind of flare out and sit flat as we sew around there. So just again matching the edges. Try not to stretch this cord. It is it's kind of a knitted polyester fabric, so it will stretch, which is the idea, to help it sit nice and neat as you go around a corner, around the curve, but we don't want it to stretch on the straight bits. So again, just snip into the seam allowance, hold it flat, bend that around. You could pin it if you wanted to, or if you've got some fabric clips, might be easier with the bow saw because it's so thick. So just coming up to the final corner here, and again snip into the seam allowance. Right, and now I can see where my ends are going to overlap, and I want them to overlap. So I'm going to cut them so that they overlap by about 1 inch. And let's just sew a little bit closer. So I've got the two ends that are kind of meeting like that. So what I want to do is to make the cords meet but overlap the fabrics. So I'm going to just unpick some of the stitches on one side here. Again by around about an inch. So just use your quick unpick or a sharp pair of scissors and just peel that back. I'm just going to trim this end back a little bit, and then I want the two ends of the cord inside the fabric to meet. So let's peel the fabric back, and I'm going to cut that right just there. So the cord's meeting, but the fabric can now overlap. So if I turn the end of the fabric over to make it neat, now because it's polyester it's not going to crease, so I'll have to hold that while you, oops, see it wants to bounce back out again. You could use a little bit of glue from a glue pen to hold it if that makes it easier, and then pop inside the opposite side. Oops. So that overlaps, fabric overlaps, and the cord's inside there. And then we're going to sew again straight across where the join is. And that's going to make it barely visible. Okay, so I'm just holding that. Again, you can hold it with a pin if you wanted to. Feed it under the machine. And that's finished. Don't worry about this. If that's a little bit longer, you can always actually trim that back. But that's how neat your join is going to look when it's on the outside of your bag. So we need to do exactly the same with the base of the bag. Again, I'm not going to quilt this, I'm just going to apply the binding around the edge. Then we'll take our zipped panels. Now you'll cut this to the length that you need, and then put your bosal foam on the wrong side, and then cut a 1.5 strip from the top. And the reason I've done it that way is because that's easier than trying to put the foam on the back of a thin strip like this. So that's the reason I've done it. Do make sure that when you cut this, you cut the 1.5 from the top piece, not the bottom piece, because it's the deeper part of the case that's going to be at the bottom. Now I'm going to fold these both in half and just put a little mark on the halfway point at the top and at the bottom. Oops. That's it. Top, bottom. And then we're going to fit the zip in between the two pieces. Now with the zips, fold the ends over to the back of the zip, and I've just popped a little bit of glue on there to hold them in place. You could put a couple of hand stitches if you wish, and do that on both of the zips, and that's going to allow them to kind of almost meet in the centre when you join these together. So starting at the centre with the zip facing down, let's undo that, that might be a bit easier. And with the end of the zip, or the stopper of the zip, just at the centre mark there, we're going to sew the zip down the side. So I'll just pop a clip in there. Clip all the way down if you wanted to, I'm not going to. Just move the zip right out of the way and sew down the centre of the zip tape. Now with my machine, because it is a digital machine, you can move the needle from one side to another using the stitch length button. And this means I don't have to put the zipper foot on, because now the stitch goes straight down the centre of the zip tape. But if you prefer to put your zipper foot on, then that's fine. Always stop with your needle down, line up the edge again of the zip with the edge of the fabric. Just keep holding that in place until you get to the end. And then with the second zip, we're going to do this facing obviously in the opposite direction. So we'll have the two ends meeting as close as they can here. You won't get them right up against each other, but you'll get them pretty close. And we'll clip it. And it may seem a bit odd, but I'm going to sew from this side, so I'm going to move the needle over to the right hand side. If you're using a zipper foot, you may have to take the foot off and put it onto the other side of the take-up lever. Alright, so hold that in place, go straight over the 2 zips at the top and line up the edges. Just move the zip slider right out of the way. And again, if you do need to stop with your needle down and right down to the end. Then let's do the zips back up again. And then the second side of the fabric needs to go on the opposite sides of the zips here. So make sure your fabric's the right way up. And I'm going to start from the end and line up the edges of the 2 pieces of fabric. And that should mean that where my centre mark was is exactly where the middle of the zips are now. So this time I can just sew straight down the tape on both zips. I'll need to move the needle back again over to the left and pull this away. It kind of wants to fight back and curl over the zip, but we're not having any of that. So just move it out of the way as you sew. And again, if you wanted to pin or clip this, it's quite easy to pin through the foam. It may be, it's about 1/4 inch thick, but it is very easy to sew through and pin through. So you could pin or you could clip it if you prefer. I'm just coming up to where the zips are joining. So stop with the needle down and lift the foot up, and you can manoeuvre these out of the way. Oops, while we carry on sewing. I'm actually going to leave that one intact until I get to it. That's better. So the zips meeting here just the same as on the opposite side. And just sew straight across. Now I can move this one out of the way. And carry on sewing. Right, let's zip this back up again. And then I need to fold back the foam away from the zip and top stitch. So it is quite chunky there now, so I need to take it slowly. So, whoops. I'm sewing from the top, but I'm feeling on the back of there that it is folded away from the zip. Okay, so I need to sew quite close to that seam. Make sure it's folded away. Foot down. I can move the needle back to the centre again now. And I'm still keeping a long stitch. I'm on number 3. Let's start sewing. So as I'm going to peel back. So underneath here I'm peeling the foam away from the zip so it folds away. No point in trying to iron that because it'll just want to bounce back. So this is the easiest way to do it. So keep stopping every now and again and fold that back. It doesn't matter if you don't catch all of it, to be honest. It's just to try and keep the foam away from the zip. And I think the top stitching gives a professional look to your work. So again, let's just smooth that back. We need to do this along both sides. Peel it back. And again, if you want to check what's going on, that's the side that I'm sewing. You can see that keeps it nice and neat and away from the zip. So we'll just keep folding it back, sewing, and then we'll repeat on the opposite side. So I'll just trim away any loose threads I can see poking out here. I don't know where they keep coming from. And that's how my zip panel is going to fasten. That's what it looks like from the back. I've missed a little bit there. Do you know, I'm not worried about that. Now this strip, this whole strip now needs to be cut to 28.5 inches. The reason I'm trimming this down now rather than giving an exact size is for reasons, oh, that's not too bad. Sometimes when you start sewing at the beginning, when you come to the end, these two don't match up perfectly. So if you start to trim, that means the whole panel is going to be a little bit too small. So I've allowed an extra ½ inch on this panel to allow for that. And then we're going to trim it back down to size now. So let's see how far out we are. I need to trim ½ inch off. So I'm going to take 1/4 inch from each end, and I'll cut the ends of the zip off while I'm here as well. So if you are going to trim anything like this, trim from both ends, because that will help to keep the zips right in the centre. So 28.5. Yep, that takes me down to 1/4 inch from this side as well. Right, now you'll have like a spine piece, and that's going to be sewn in between these two pieces to make a tube. So make sure they're the same way around, right sides together. Oh, this, by the way, now should measure 4 inches, so it measures the same as this. If it is a little bit bigger, and again that may depend on the seam allowance that you've used for your zip, you can trim this edge down as well, so that all these pieces are now the same size. So let's line up the edges here and sew straight across. So I just need to increase the seam allowance. That's it. And then we're going to fold this back with all of the fabric going in the same direction, away from the zip, and top stitch it. Then join the other two ends together to make a loop. Turn the right side out, and again fold this back away from the zip and top stitch. Oops, there we go. So I've already got my markings where the centre of the top and the bottom are. Let's open that up like this and mark the centre back as well. Join those markings together, and let's mark the centre here. So I'm basically marking 4/4. And this is going to help me to sew this panel to the top and the bottom and keep them even. So we'll do that in just a second. We need to make the handle up next, actually. So with the handle, we have our fabric, which is folded into four, as in long sides to the centre, and then fold in half again. Oh, need to fold the ends in. Ends over first. I'm just going to finger crease that, then those to the centre, and then in half, and the same on this side. So fold the end over, long sides to the centre, and fold in half. And I'm going to top stitch along each side. And then place this over the centre of the top of your bag, and I'm just going to trim those ends off again. So measure and mark that if you wish, but the same distance from each side and the same distance from the top and the bottom as well. And then we're going to just lift up the centre a little bit like that to give the handle a shape. And I'm just going to stick a pin through there to hold that in place. And then I'm going to sew a little box at each end. That doesn't look quite, that's better. A little box at each end. It doesn't have to be, you know, a box with a cross in the centre. This isn't going to carry an awful lot of weight. So just a little square at each end will be absolutely fine. If you wanted to secure that with a little bit of glue before you sew, so you're not sewing around the pins so much, that would work. So let's turn this around and back down, and then back to where we started. Snip threads, oops, and then the same on this end. Snip loose threads, and that's the top finished. So these two pieces now need to go inside my loop. So just like I did with the loop, I'm going to mark the centre points. So let's fold this in half, put a mark here, one there, and we'll do this way as well. And just to make sure it's sitting nice and square. Oops. So take a look at the direction of the fabric. This is going to be where the back hinge is going to be. So this is going to go right sides to this, with those two marks facing there. Let's turn this inside out actually. So line up those two, and we'll have a few clips in here. And then we'll go to the opposite side and line those two up. And then the two end pieces. Perfect. And then I'm going to carry on clipping just to make sure that everything matches up. Do make sure when you come to the corners as well, these bits on the on the seam allowance can sometimes fold in, so just make sure that they are in the seam, not facing outwards. And we'll just keep on clipping all the way around. This can be eased a little bit, by the way, so if you find that one section is slightly bigger than the other, there's a bit of give on the corners, so you can kind of stretch them a bit to make them fit if need be. Right, that does seem like an awful lot of clips. I've practically, oh, I'll have another one there. I've practically used every clip that I have in my box, but that's really important. If you have, if the top doesn't fit the bottom exactly, as you see here, as I said earlier on, we can ease that to make it fit. It's a tiny amount. If you don't clip or pin this in place first, and you start sewing from one side, all of these little bits that you can ease will end up as one big pleat on one side, and you'll have to unpick it and start all over again. So this is worth doing. I'm now going to sew along the seam here. Now this is the line where I sewed the binding into the top and the base, and I want to sew along exactly that same line, if not just a smidgen on the inside. Right, but we can double check this afterwards and just make sure that the binding or the piping is looking good, and I'll explain that as we come up to it. So again, take your time with it. Really do take your time with this, it's worth it. So slowly sew, taking the clips out as you go. So I'll just put my clip bag over there, and if you can sew just on the inside of that stitch line, it will make a nice neat finish on the outside. Again, just coming up to the corner, so slowly round the corner, making sure the edges of the fabric are meeting as you go. Now I'm going to form a crease here if I'm not careful, so I'm going to just move that out of the way. And take this around the curve. And I know I keep saying it's important, but when you come up to the curved corners, that's the shape of the case. So it's nice that it is a nice smooth line with no puckers and gathers and pleats and wobbly lines in it. Right, so I'll just come back up to where I've started, and now I'm going to turn this over, turn it the right side out, and just check your piping. Okay, because here I think I can go a little bit closer. I can see the stitching on the actual piping there, so I need to go closer. I think the rest of it's looking okay. Just that one corner, so let's turn it back inside out again. And just revisit that one corner. And so a little bit further on the inside of the stitches that I've just made. So I'm sewing closer to the actual piping cord. So again, let's flip this over and double check it. And that looks so much better, so I'm happy with that. So now we've done the bottom, oh sorry, the top, we're going to fit the bottom in the same way. So just like before, I'm going to fold in half and find the center points, I'm going to put 101 clips in there to hold it in place. Sew it with the zip open slightly this time because we'll need to turn it through. And double check your piping again, just to make sure that you're happy that you've sewn close enough to it to give a nice finish. Okay, so just like before, I'm going to just pop the corners out and make sure I'm happy with them. I think that's looking good. And now you can really start to see what the case is going to look like. So let's just zip this up. It's a little bit misshapen, and what will make it nice and square would be later on we're going to take a hot iron with plenty of steam and crease across these seams and press them and hold the steam there and leave it a while till it cools and just keep pressing, and that's going to make it square. Another reason for the 1,000,001 clips that we had on there and centralising everything, so that really does need a press, is to make sure that the top and the base are sitting inside this square, because if you don't match up all of the points and the top's a little bit twisted, the whole bag will twist. It won't sit right, it won't look right. So that's another reason to keep just matching them up. But you know, at the end of the day, if it doesn't match up, you've got your quick unpick. It's not a huge project. You can just unpick it and start again. So I'm going to give this a press actually right now, just so I can show you how nice and square that is looking, and give you an idea of what the finished bag's going to look like. And then we'll get on with putting in the lining. So that looks so much better when it's pressed, and again all I've done is to kind of squish the seam on the ironing board and give a good old blast of steam and hold that in place until it kind of sets, and it'll hold its shape really nicely. And on the inside I've trimmed down the seams so that they're about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam allowance is about 1/8 of an inch basically around there. So now we can put the outer piece to one side and we'll start on the lining. So first thing to do is to make up the inside pocket. So I've cut my 2 pieces of fabric and I'm going to sew these right sides together with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance this time, all the way around the edge, with the turning gap in the bottom of about a couple of inches. We'll snip across the corners and then turn the right side out and press. Now you could put a dividing line down the centre of the pocket if you wish to make it into 2. Let's just push that out. And if you have a turning tool again, or a knitting needle or something like that, let's just poke out those corners to make them nice and square. And we'll give this a quick press with my iron. Oops. And I'm just folding the edges of the opening inwards like so, and when this is sewn into the caddy lining, that'll sew the opening closed. So just to make that neat, I'm going to top stitch just across the top edge here. Then we'll take one of our lining pieces, and this is going to sit centrally from each side and about 1.5 inches from the bottom. Let's just snip off those threads. There they are again. And we'll have a couple of pins to hold that in place while I sew. And we'll sew around the bottom 3 sides. So just at the top of the pocket, we'll do a reversing stitch just to make that seam nice and strong. And so quite close to the edge of the pocket, when you come down to the corner, you're going to stop with the needle down. And then sew straight across the bottom, and again this will close the opening as I'm sewing. Needle down here, and back down the final side. Wear the little back stitch at the end again. Right, now the 2 long strips this time. So on the outer panel, these were the bits that had the zip in the centre. Of course, there's no zip in the lining. So I folded over the top of the large piece and the bottom of the smaller piece by 1/4 inch and press. And then when you take the piece that is in effect the spine, these are going to go right sides together and line up the bottom edge here and pin, and then the top edge of the smaller piece on the top and pin, and just sew along this side. So I've got a gap in the centre here, that's where my zip's going to go. Then out come the pins. Make sure these long pieces aren't twisted, and pin, then sew the opposite ends of the strips to the opposite end of the spine. And again, just make sure that these are folded open as you sew. Right, now just as before, I'm going to fold the back in half, and I can just crease this to mark the centre, and let's do the same here and the same on this piece, and then let's fold this in half, and I can crease the 1/4 mark as well. So I've got 4 creases. You could put a pen mark on there if you prefer, and the same here. And then let's do the same with the lining piece. Over there. And we're just going to put these together basically in the same way as we did with the outer pieces, but without the zip. So when we line up the 2 sections, this is the lid, remember, so this is going to go to the thinner part of this section, and I want the spine bit to be here. So that's the big bit there. So let's put those right sides together and pin there. And we'll do all 4 points just like we did on the outer side. Let's pin from that way, that's going to be easier. So we don't need that bit. Just make sure again this isn't twisted. So that's going to go there like that, right sides together. And on the quarter marks here, and this side, and again just like before, you may think it's quite time consuming, but this is worth it because we want the lining to fit nice and neatly. And now we can put pins all the way around the edge here. So actually the more pins, just like with the hundreds of clips I used on the outer piece, the easier it is to match this up. So continue pinning all the way around, and then we're going to sew. And we do the same with the other piece. So again, just arrange this so it's not twisted. Let's mark the center points of the remaining lining piece. So I've just got a little extra fabric there. Let's snip that away. And then these, just like before, right sides together, matching the creases. Just try again to make sure that the fabric that goes around the zip isn't twisted. It's quite easy, it's quite a long piece now, it's quite easy to get that twisted. Let's match that one. And this one. And then again we'll carry on pinning and then sew all the way around. Right, now let's take the outer section and we'll turn this inside out and turn this one the right side out. And with the pockets on the lid, let's just slip this over the top. So corners into corners. Let's do this one half at a time and make it easier. So just push that inside. And then you'll see that the gap that we left should be the same width as the zip, and it'll stop just underneath the end of the zip here. So it may seem a little bit bulky trying to push the outer inside the lining, because obviously the lining is the outer is a little bit thicker because it's got the wadding on it. But we're going to start at the end here and hand sew this to the zip. So let's just find my needle and thread. There we go. If you want to stick a few pins in there, that will help. So I just want to be just at the bottom of the zip there. Let's get that started. So hide the knot inside the fabric. And I'm just going to catch the bottom, whoops, of where the zip sits. And I'm going to actually put a few stitches in there to hold it in place. And that's going to make it a little bit easier as we start to sew. Then as we go, the piece that you folded over just needs to overlap the edge of the zip, and then we're going to that inside. We're going to do a little stitch inside the zip. So catch the zip and then bring it out into the fold of the fabric. So don't take the needle all the way through to the outside, because you're going to see that, you'll see the stitch. So I'm just catching the zip. So where the stitches are that sewed the zip in place, just underneath there, just inside where the zip is. Okay, so quite small stitches, about 1/4 of an inch apart, and we'll just go all the way around. Now if this is a case that you're making for you, if you're not going to sell it or give it away, it's very unlikely that these stitches are ever going to be seen because they're on the inside. So unless somebody actually turns this inside out, you're not going to see the stitches. It's still nice to have them as neat as you can, but don't worry if your stitches aren't perfect. The main thing is that you don't take them through to the outside of the case, because we don't want to see them on the outside. So just keep lining this up and sew all the way around, and then we'll do the same with the opposite side around the lid. So I'm just now coming up to the end of the zip on the bottom section, and again just catching a little bit of the zip tape in here. And just to hold it while I turn around the corner, I'm going to stitch over the top a couple of times. Then you might find this a little bit lumpy at the bottom of the zip to sew across, so just quite loose stitches there. And then we're going to carry on around the lid. So again, I just like to secure the end with a couple of stitches. Let's fold this over. And again, it will seem a little tight and a little snug. There we go. And as I said before, if you do want to pop some pins around there to hold it in place, that's fine. I just like to kind of put it in place as I'm working with it. I find that easier. So let's just carry on. Again, not sewing all the way through, just catching underneath the stitches that hold the zip in. And sew all the way around. Right, so I'm just coming up to the end of the hand stitching. So let me just tie a knot in the end of the thread, make that nice and secure, and snip it off. So that's the inside. Just got a thread there as well. I'm sure they just appear from nowhere. And then let's flick this through the right side out. Might need another press. And that's my case finished. Now, one other thing that you could do, and this is optional, is to put a few stitches by hand just inside the seams and take it through to just underneath there. So just an odd stitch coming through, and that'll hold the lining in place if you think that it needs it. It may not need it, but that's an idea, that's an option for you. So let's just zip this up. There we go. You could also put a couple of ribbons just through the ends of the zip. That would look quite nice as well, I think, just to finish it off. But that is my little caddy finished. Again, I'm just going to give that another quick press because it has been screwed up rather a lot. So let's open that out. If you have steam on your iron, then that would be the best thing to use with the Bosul. So when it does start to wrinkle and crease like this, then just blast it with a little bit of steam and all those creases will simply disappear. So I'll just give this one final press. And I think we're done. So there's another caddy finish. I hope you enjoy the project. I hope you enjoy making them, and I hope you find them really useful. I'll see you next time.